All right, okie dokie. So I'm Jennifer Prescott. I'm with Capital Area Parkinson's. I'm on the board, and I do know some of you, which is awesome. And I'm a registered nurse. I'm the vice president of outreach and education for CAPS, and this is my second year involved with CAPS. And so I'm really excited. A good friend of mine, Sarah Hyde-Williams, actually, she's going to. I have it taped. We had to do a video taped with her. She had another engagement today. So due to like all the holidays and all of that stuff coming on and all the, time away. So she is going to be presenting today, and we did an awesome conversation, and it really has to do, let me tell you a little bit about her. So Sarah Hyde-Williams has nearly 20 years of experience serving seniors and as a community resource of elder care expert and in various roles throughout our community in Central Texas. Her passion in supporting family care partners and community care staff alike has grown through the years as she assisted thousands of families in walking the challenging journey, as we all know, of dementia, particularly dementia with Lewy Bodies, also Parkinson's disease dementia when placing loved ones in a long-term care community, and also having them navigate. So Sarah Hyde-Williams actually is the owner of Senior Living Advisors of Austin. She's also a dear friend of mine. We met last week. And can you guys hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. You guys, the plan is this. I'm going to share the video. After I share the video, we're going to, we will come back on live. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, or I'm going to write things down for Sarah, and then we can go forward and ask Sarah any questions that y'all might have. So just give me 1 sec, because it's a little bit more confusing. I want to make sure that I am getting things on the screen for you guys appropriately. Let's see. It just takes a minute. Bear with me here. I had it up and then it's not showing on my screen. So 1 more sec. Oh, hold on. Okay. All right, we're getting there. The joy of technology. All right, almost there. Share sound, check. All right, if somebody can do me a favor when I do this, can you just give me like a thumbs up if you guys can hear it? I will be turning it on now.
With a friend, thank you for having me.
Can you guys hear?
We're thrilled. So today we're going to talk about advanced care planning, and we're going to get into a lot of detail. So I know you may want to start. I've got some questions for you. So do you want to get started and just talk about some stuff, or you want me to ask you questions?
Let me introduce what I call advanced care planning.
Perfect.
In the long-term care world, home health, hospice, home care, when we begin looking at end of life, we call that advanced care planning. Here in our agency, we've broadened that term deeply to look at financial, legal, medical, wants and wishes, where we go from here, what that conversation needs to sound like, so that we truly can give thought to what we want our life to look like through our end of life. So in a nutshell, we broaden it to beyond end of life issues.
We know both of us are in senior care, but my question to you to begin is, we have all different ages of people that are probably listening today. So what would you say would be a good time to start thinking about kind of planning for your future, your healthcare needs, through end of life?
Great question, and I'm going to answer it in 2 parts. I typically get a social work consult from a neurologist, a primary care physician, when a diagnosis of a chronic health condition has popped up.
Okay.
So lots of education, starting those conversations is where I typically get involved. I'll step back on the other side and say, and I'll show my age. I'm 54. My husband is 10 years my senior, and we have begun having those conversations right now. Neither one of us have a life-threatening chronic health condition. However, recognizing, first of all, what we do for a living. And second of all, beginning to look at, hey, in 10, 15 years, we're looking at retirement. What do we want that to look like? And if I were to have one or the other of us to have an event that ended life, or gotten a diagnosis of a chronic health condition, what do we want our life to look like moving forward? We've begun those conversations and really taking note of those types of things, that if he could not speak for himself, how would I guide his medical care moving forward, and vice versa?
You know, I think it's one of those things that, obviously being in senior care, we are comfortable talking about this and socializing this topic. Yeah. But a lot of people, so maybe they've just got a diagnosis, or, you know, they're just not ready to really come to terms. How would you recommend socializing the topic, even if someone's maybe in their 20s or 30s, maybe they're, you know, a grandchild or something that's watching this video? Like, how would you, you know, socialize this type of, you know, it's kind of a heavy topic.
It is. It is. AARP put out a poll recently that 90% of people wish or want to have this conversation with a loved one of some sort, but only 27% of people actually follow through with it. And one of the things that I tell people, it always seems too soon until it's too late. And so early is how I would have these conversations. And they could be as easy as, Dad and I are out on the boat fishing. It's a quiet afternoon. And I say, you know what, really, I've begun thinking about some things. I would love to have your thoughts on that, and bring up the topic. Baking with mom, or a hike with your spouse, quiet conversation at home, or we make it a formal event. We figure out who needs to be part of the conversation. We all gather, maybe as a family. We sit around that kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and we say, hey, we really need to put some things on paper and have this conversation now. I always tell families, this is a very individualized conversation. You're going to know your mother. I wouldn't push it per se, but I would introduce, this is what I want. I've been talking about, I've been thinking about it. What do you think, or what would you want in that instance? Is kind of that soft entrance.
Yeah, like peppering. I like peppering the information in there. I think that's helpful. And I really liked what you said about talking about what you feel comfortable with, what you want, you know, your hopes and, you know, your wishes, because I think it's easier to talk about what you want, because, you know, at end of life and even death and dying, a lot of people are not comfortable talking about that. And so, you know, we have to plan in general in our lives, because there could be an incident that occurs that we're not even prepared for. So I think that moves into my next question, is that, you know, what happens if we don't have, and I know we're going to talk some more about, you know, advanced directives and what they are, but from a general sense, you know, if there's an incident, how does that work if there isn't any advanced directives? Like, what does that look like for the family and their decision making?
It's one of the key points that I always make to families for the argument for having advanced care planning, is that it relieves your family of having to make those emergency situations when they don't have a clue what you would have wanted for end of life. Absolutely. They agonize, they have guilt or shame about the decision that they are getting ready to make. That's a lot, that's a burden that we certainly don't want on anyone else, which means we need to have those conversations early.
It's true. There's a lot of pressure. And what you said about that guilt is, that's real. I mean, the survivors, or the people that are living, are the ones that have to live with decisions that they made. And so if you don't make your wants and needs, you know, make people aware, and actually doing it in writing, you know, with an attorney or, working with a professional, the waters can get muddied, and then there's fighting within families and that kind of thing. And I know you've never seen that before.
Only a few times.
I know, I'm sure. So what do you feel, let's talk about specifics on advanced directives. So what do you feel from sort of like a checky box? What do you find are the most important advanced directives as we're aging that people should have in place?
Power of attorney.
Okay.
Absolutely. And how does that differ from a guardianship? We want those powers of attorney put in place early, because if we have nothing put in place, and I'm talking about medical power of attorney,
Sure.
a durable power of attorney, which is typically legal matters. And then one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, I work in the dementia world. And when somebody cannot make those decisions, or through the course of Parkinson's disease, we have the dementia piece that goes with it. Maybe even with long-term DOPA use, we have psychosis that goes with that as well, which oftentimes, to get our loved one into a mental health or a behavioral health facility, we need a mental health power of attorney. So one more thing a lot of people don't talk about. Powers of attorney, very much so. And if we don't have those put in place early, or when the person shows capacity, we have to go down that long, expensive road of guardianship.
And it is long and expensive.
A will is important to have.
Okay.
And then advanced directives are what we truly call end-of-life wishes. There is another form. Texas has begun a POLST initiative. So if you're not familiar with POLST, it's
tell me about it.
POLST, which is one of my favorites, and my husband and I are getting this in place as well. They're physician orders for life-sustaining treatment.
Okay.
It is an actual physician's order that states end-of-life wishes that cannot be changed or overwritten. They are an actual order from a physician. So if you will go and Google POLST Texas, it will pop up a form. You can easily fill that out, take it to your physician, have it signed, and keep that with you in case of emergency.
Oh, I didn't know about that. See, I learned something new today. And so is it sort of like a living will, where it would say, if this, then this, or?
So whether or not we want CPR.
Okay.
Whether or not we want any life-sustaining treatment, such as a breathing apparatus, a tracheotomy, a feeding tube, anything of that sort, if we cannot speak for ourselves, having that treatment put in place. And so we're directing what that physician is writing orders for, that tells another physician. It goes from healthcare provider to healthcare provider with the person.
Oh, I love that, because an out-of-hospital DNR is very similar to that. This is just sort of another level from that. So I love that. I learned something new today. That's great.
And I'm glad you mentioned DNR. That is something important to talk about as well. Is do we want to go through every single bit of this painful decision of having CPR at end of life? It's extremely difficult for families to stand by and watch this happen to a loved one, or do we simply want to let them go?
Sure. And that's challenging.
So incredibly hard.
And most of the time, unfortunately, it's not successful when you do CPR on either an elderly person or somebody with, a lot of comorbidities and a lot of, extensive disease process. So when you're making a decision, one of the things you talked about is sort of like a medical power of attorney, that kind of thing. How do you make a decision? This is just sort of like more of a personal question. How do you make a decision? Obviously, if you have a spouse, that's easy most of the time, I would say. But how do you make a decision about who would be a good person to use as a medical power of attorney? Maybe you don't have, maybe you're not married or something like that.
So in certain instances, we have no, some families have no children,
Okay.
to have that
Sure.
decision. So of course we rely upon nieces or nephews or brothers or sisters in that instance. One can act for the other. However, a lot of times when I get a referral from a neurologist, I work with a lot of them, and we do a lot of advanced care planning when it comes to either dementia with Lewy bodies or Parkinson's disease dementia. One has a chronic health condition. And so thinking through the process of, would this person with this chronic health condition outlive me?
Sure.
So let's say my husband had a diagnosis of DLB or PDD. Would I want him to be my medical power of attorney? More than likely not.
Mm-hmm.
I may be his. It would be logical to think that I would outlive him, so I could be his. However, who I would want to be mine is maybe my sister or my child. And so thinking through those issues, that maybe there's a first and a second, maybe a third. So if for one reason an emergency happened and one couldn't do it, another could. So thinking through those possibilities of who could step in and make those decisions if I couldn't.
And I think having someone that sort of has a calm demeanor, that actually knows specifically what you want and can truly execute on what your wishes are. I think I've definitely been in situations in hospice before that even though a family member has set out what their expectations are, and even in writing, sometimes the actual decision making can be really challenging when you're actually faced with it. So I love this idea of like being really thoughtful about who you choose, and also, you know, the decision about having backups is really important.
Yes.
So what would you say, you know, if you're struggling, maybe, you know, you're peppering the conversation, you know, about, and you're starting to think about, you know, what am I going to need as I'm aging? Is it helpful ever to include maybe a physician or, you know, a nurse practitioner or a PA sort of in the conversation if you are struggling with your loved one? You know, maybe they do have, you know, early stage Parkinson's disease, and maybe they're, you know, they've got some other comorbidities and they're progressing faster. Maybe they have, you know, dementia also. Is it helpful at all, or could it be helpful to have a physician or a healthcare provider, you know, help with this conversation?
Yes. Point blank, yes. The reason for it is that where I meet most families is that where they are today and where I see them, most families are looking back. Well, they used to be able to do that, or they've always done this.
Yeah.
A physician or healthcare provider can look forward. Tell me what my prognosis is. Tell me what this looks like at any given point in time. Could the dementia or the psychosis be part of this? And what do I need to look out for? At what certain point may I not be able to swallow? And I need to figure out whether or not I want a feeding tube. At what given point in time, if I can no longer ambulate, what do I need to look out for? So giving us the nuts and bolts of physically or medically wise, what are we looking at and what decisions may I need to make?
I think that's a really good point. I think as the diseases are progressing, it's really hard sometimes to see the forest through the trees, and you're kind of in that moment, or you remember what that person was like before, and it's hard to understand or even be able to fathom what it's going to be in the future. So that moves us into kind of the question about truly planning for care. And I think that's probably, it's what you do. That's your life's work. You know, you're helping families navigate, you know, the web of healthcare, and especially with, you know, specializing in dementia and Parkinson's disease. And that's why you're, you know, here with us today. So I guess the first question that we always get from people is, okay, so how bad is it going to get? And how do I, like, what is it going to look like? Like, what kind of care am I going to need? So from the beginning, what kind of care do you think like people could potentially need, and where would they get that care if they have maybe a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, dementia, or, you know, Alzheimer's, any type of, you know, memory care disorders?
Oh my gosh, where do I even unpack that?
Sorry,
question?
big question.
So thinking through that, knowing the disease process and
Okay.
educating yourself, or having someone else come and do that education with you. I do an awful lot of education when it comes to this disease process, and saying these are the core characteristics, these are some of the supporting characteristics, and this is what we may need to look at moving forward. One of the things that, and I'll go through briefly, yes, I do talk about all the legal matters that we've talked about earlier. We've talked about financial, the ability to pay for that care and what we want that care to look like. And then given the medical diagnosis, one of the things that I always stress, and the last part of that conversation is, given this entire dynamic of what we're looking at, who is your tribe?
I love that.
Who are the people around you that you can call and say, Mary, I ran out of bread this morning. The next time you're at HEB, will you pick me up a loaf? Or is it, Jennifer, I really need a caregiver Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 to 12. How fast can you guys be here to do an intake and have that conversation? So really, paid or unpaid, who are the folks in your life that can start providing all of that? But education is key. What does that look like? We've had conversations with the physician. We know what prognosis looks like. We've read a book or two about what this disease process looks like moving forward, and we can begin wrapping our brain around what does that need to look like. And in a lot of times, I do a lot of social work consults for the neurology clinics in the area, in which I am starting those conversations. This is really what we're going to start looking toward. And how would you handle that, given legal, financial, medical, all of this, what's important to you? So if I could unpack that a little bit and talk all the way around the circle.
No, I think it's really good. One of the things, is what it's sort of that cliche word of knowledge is power.
Yes.
But I definitely strongly believe that, there's so many negative connotations about caregiving, and there's a lot of things going to happen for your bodies that are bad. You could have high blood pressure. There's a lot of, people say that you die sooner. Some people say you actually die long, you live longer if you're a caregiver because you have a reason to live. But I think that knowledge is power, because if you know how to do the things like, bathing, if you bathe your loved one, because most people are unpaid caregivers, right? I mean, the world that we live in, because caregiving is actually very expensive. And like, does Medicare even cover, caregiving? I know the answer, but share with everyone. Is that something that's covered by Medicare?
Traditional Medicare does not.
Correct,
at all.
Yeah.
Medicare in and of itself is health insurance.
Sure.
That's all it is. For hospital stay, home health service, which is nursing and physical therapy, all of that, a rehab stay, it covers all of that, doctor's visits, hospice. However, some of our supplementals will or have begun to cover so many hours. Some of our Medicare Advantage plans, I've heard they are beginning to offer that. So I always tell folks, when I find out they do have a Medicare Advantage plan, call them, ask them if there is a home care provision. The VA provides for home care as well. So there are a few ways to pay for this. Area Agency on Aging sometimes will award so many hours as well.
Yep.
Medicaid also has a home care provision. So there are many different resources we can pull from, given our financial landscape, so that we know exactly what our options are moving forward, and we can plan for that.
And you had talked about the VA. And so that's one of those difficult things to navigate sometimes, the webs.
Yes.
So what would be your recommendation if someone, has been a vet, either themselves or their spouse? Where would be a good first step to give them a call?
So there are quite a few organizations that will help you fill out aid and attendance paperwork. A couple here in the Austin area However, the VA themselves,
Okay.
there is an office in which there is a caseworker.
Okay.
And ask for that caseworker and ask specifically for the Veterans Administration home care provision.
Okay.
There is an actual better term for it. I could find it in just a second. But
they could call you too. They could call you too and gather information, and you could help them.
They could. Yeah, I can always find them resources and supports. That's the majority of what I do is put those things in place for folks. But the VA has a caseworker that can be assigned to look at home care provision and put that in place for you.
That's great. So talking about care specifically, like, how does someone know, so because what happens with diseases, and especially with Parkinson's, it's a slow progression. So, and what are those like key signs that, a person would notice if they're taking care of someone that would indicate that they may need to have could use some care and support? Yeah. So what would that look like?
So many of those early things that happened are falls.
Okay. Falls
is a huge, whether or not it be through syncope, which means a blackout faint fall, could be from that orthostatic hypotension, that irregular blood pressure that happens an awful lot. Could be low vision or depth perception. Oftentimes we have as well. So falls is the number one. A lot of caregivers reach out to me when they say, hey, we call the fire department every single time that happens, but we have to have someone with our loved one so that we can reduce those falls. We can preemptively step in and avoid those. There are many times that we begin looking at incontinence issues.
Okay.
Oftentimes, and also when that happens, bathing, toileting, all of that as well. When we begin looking at those 5 ADLs or activities of daily living, we begin someone steps in to do those. And typically it's either an adult child that steps in and does, I'm running by to take care of mom's finances or go to the grocery store or provide a few meals back and forth. But it's when we're providing lots of time, and we either do that ourselves as an adult child or a spouse, or we recognize that we can no longer put all these hours in or have the ability to take care of ourselves and our loved one, that we hire in paid care as well.
Well, and I think that kind of moves me into my next question is obviously caregiver burnout is a real thing. And sometimes it's kind of like you move towards having, you're used to taking care of your young children. And then as we age, and then they have a complex health condition, and it's very challenging to take care of someone with an advanced, disease process that makes it challenging, bathing, dressing, grooming, all of those things. But then there's also that sense of burnout from caregivers. And so what are some things, because I think, how do you have a conversation? Like, let's say, there's a daughter here and they're noticing, maybe the mom is watching today that's taking care of her husband, but, a daughter is also watching. How could she talk to her mom about, maybe noticing that maybe she's potentially needing some additional care and support, for her to be able to take care of herself and her own, mental well-being?
I see that an awful lot. Because we as spouses, we've made a vow, we've made a promise that we will always care for our person that we have chosen to share our life with. But it's typically the adult children that reach out and say, I'm really worried about mom or dad. They're wearing themselves out. How can I find the resources? One of the things that I gear them toward first and foremost is a support group.
Love that.
Because oftentimes we can give our wants and wishes. Mom, you can't keep doing this. We recognize the need. No, I've got it. I don't need any help. I can do it myself. But when we sit in a group of our peers and we say, hey, I'm really putting in a lot of hours, or I'm worried about my mom, or she's doing this, we see heads nod. And there is really power and camaraderie in a group of our peers when we bare our soul and we see heads nod, and it's kind of this silent me too. And we
It's
know
true.
that we're not the only ones. And so to gain that courage of, hey, there are others out there. How have you handled that? How did you find you had that conversation with mom? How did you find that you hired in a caregiver to provide support for mom? And how did that go? And so providing those resources of other care partners and gaining from the wisdom of the group.
I like that a lot. And, you know, maybe even for a daughter, like peppering the information, kind of like those advanced care planning, you know, peppering that information and just starting to sort of like bring to their attention. Have you noticed that families that are, you know, caregivers are maybe getting short with their loved ones? Have you had that experience and sort of not taking care of themselves and also having maybe some health issues themselves that's making it more challenging?
Where I typically see most care partners is I can handle the days, it's the nights.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
When they're up all hours of the night, then I'm not sleeping. Plus, I'm also caregiving during the day.
And it's scary at night, right? I mean, it just is more scary. Even when you had little kids and babies, it just, their fevers always got worse at night. And obviously, if you've got, you know, dementia, we've got, you know, sundowning, and then sometimes that can just last the whole night, and that can be really scary. That's actually that's a really, really, really good point. So one of the things is about, so have you seen that because of the pandemic, have you noticed that you've had more people like attending the support groups that you do than before, you know, from a virtual perspective, like our reach is bigger? Can you talk about sort of, you know, maybe if somebody's wondering if they, because I mean, I get there's a perception of kind of bearing your soul. I don't want to bare my soul on the internet. Is there a way that they could, you know, come in and feel safe? What kind of, you know, recommendations would you have for them if they're interested in, you know, attending? We have support groups through CAPS. I know you've got support groups as well. You know, what would be your recommendation to someone maybe new to support groups virtually and maybe in person?
So we do have I represent the Lewy Body Dementia Association. And when we say Lewy Body, it's an umbrella term that means dementia with Lewy bodies, Parkinson's disease, dementia and psychosis, and multiple cortical atrophy or multiple system atrophy. So it's this umbrella term. Okay. So I volunteer and represent the Lewy Body Dementia Association, and I am the facilitator and educator for the Central Texas area. Okay. When COVID happened in March of 2020, all of our groups went to Zoom. We scrambled to continue to provide support to care partners, but we did it through a Zoom platform. So a couple of things happened that were just absolutely eye-opening. First and foremost, we not only did one group a month, we started doing 2 groups a month. Okay. So our care partners, because of that isolation, needed more exposure, needed more sitting in a room. It is a policy of the Lewy Body Dementia Association that everyone who joins our support groups does so both on video and on audio. You are not required to say a single thing. I have many folks that join the group that simply listen the entire hour to an hour and a half, but they're gaining information and they're being part of a group.
I love that.
What we've also found through our support groups is that because we are on a Zoom online platform, it opened our reach up from Central Texas to all over the world. I have many families who maybe mom or dad live here in Austin and the children are scattered across the United States, or vice versa. One of the children lives here in Austin. They have found me, and all of the children and mom or dad hop onto the call as well. So we truly have folks from all over the nation that join our groups, which means that our groups have doubled or tripled in size because of that. So we're meeting more needs of those folks.
I think that's really important. And I know that we've seen that too from CAPS. I think that the reach, we're able to touch people kind of where they are. And I think having a chronic disease, whether it's Parkinson's, anything, it's very isolating. And even though you know that lots of people are experiencing what you're experiencing, it still feels isolating and really scary. And the ability to be able to connect with people online. And I think now as the world is obviously opening up more. And I mean, we are planning at CAPS to be, I'm hoping in the next 2 months to have our first, in-person Saturday meeting, which so many people are so excited about it. It gives people options. And I think they need to have options because sometimes their loved ones are, pretty severely have a lot of things going on, and they may not be able to afford a caregiver or have the ability to leave, but you can leave for that moment, whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. You can hopefully, at least if you're caring for someone, you can actually have them by your side and you can make sure that they're safe. So I really love that. So what are some of those other things, like big questions, it is caregiving, or we can even talk about, I know you help folks, make decisions about, can we age in place and continue to stay age in place, or do we, have to move during, be due to the cost or complexity of the disease process into maybe a community, memory care or something like that. So how do people start to sort of wrap their head around those decision making?
Is through what we deem advanced care planning.
Okay.
So beginning to have those conversations legally, financially, medically, what in our heart are our wants and wishes, who are the people around us that can support us. And so our wants and wishes may not line up financially or legally.
Good point.
And so really looking at the entire landscape, the entire dynamic for what it is, that's going to guide our options moving forward. And so where we step in and we have those conversations, we put it out in the light. Many of our families are prepared to speak about it at that point. We have a 2.5 hour conversation. We build for them a document moving forward of here's our plan A, here's our plan B, here's our plan C. We know, given the disease process, what we're looking at through end of life. And we've put that in place for you.
I love that. And you're also talking about, also within their budgetary constraints as well, right?
Yes. There are many folks that either have few resources, and that guides certain options.
Sure.
There are folks on the exact opposite that have numerous financial resources to draw from, and that's a different set of options. The majority of us in America are kind of in between.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have some resources available to us. They're probably not unlimited.
Sure.
And so given what our wants and wishes are, how can we honor that? However, looking at the long-term possibility of living 10, 20 years with a chronic health condition, can our money support what our wants and wishes are? And do we need to kind of make a plan B for what happens if it doesn't? And talking through, these are all your options. I am never to tell a family, this is what you have to do.
Sure.
You tell me what's important to you. Then we're going to build a plan based upon what's important to you, and really realistically, what can we make happen for you?
I think that's so important because there's been a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of people who think that, when they become of age, when they get Medicare, that they get, assisted living's paid for. And there's a lot of different things that aren't necessarily correct. And so I think, one of the messages I'm hearing is that, pre-planning, even maybe before, which I think is important, prior to being faced with an illness is really important, because your options will be limited if you don't have some of the financial resources, or you maybe don't have the VA or something like that. And there's different things the VA can do as well, from long-term care and that kind of thing, which is nice. But I think I've had situations many times where, I kind of tell families, they're looking at their options, and I say to them sometimes, well, you've saved for the rainy day.
Yeah.
Today's the rainy day, like it's here, today's the rainy day. And it's sort of like that puts it into perspective, because, we want to be protecting our resources, because, none of us, almost no one has infinite resources. So especially in these day and age, we have to be really careful, and the cost to pay for, services, care, whatever's needed, even outside of what an insurance would pay for, medications, we didn't even talk about that. just kind of throwing that in, are there any recommendations that you have for, maybe people are struggling, and I know with paying for medications, are there any resources that maybe people could use to help them pay for some of those expensive medications that they can't afford?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Call the 1-800 line for the manufacturer of the medication that you take.
Good idea.
So let's throw out Nuplazid.
Okay.
That's a new one.
Mm-hmm.
It is used an awful lot with advanced Parkinson's when we're having some hallucinations. And so that is extremely cost prohibitive. And I'm not sure I know a single family that can afford to pay for out of pocket for that medication. So, but I do know that many of our neurologists, our movement disorder specialists, have a resource that will fax over the order for the medication. They will put you into a prescription plan and allow those copay assistance programs. You can also do that yourself if your physician does not have access to that. Most do, but some may not, who are prescribing this medication. And you can certainly reach out to the manufacturer and ask for copay assistance program.
Oh, that's great. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because you want to have access to, because one medication may not work, and then you have to move to a medication that may work. So that's a great opportunity. So I love that. I know that there's also like GoodRx cards and things like that. Obviously, it's not necessarily going to pay for those new medications, but that's, a good option. And even Walmart too, when they have those little, even generic medications, like for $4, and maybe you get some of your not expensive medications through them, but maybe you get your, blood pressure medications or something like that through there. That's a good way to save, a lot of money and pay like $4. It's kind of shocking to see. You could drive a half a mile down the road and you'll pay $4, and another half mile you'll pay $40. So
yes,
it's very, very, very frustrating. So kind of as we start to wrap up, so are there any things that, families kind of tend to ask you, like a question constantly, or those first phone calls? I guess who would be the person that would be a good person to call you for your company?
I typically get people in one of two camps.
Okay.
Either they've just been given a diagnosis and they're beginning to research, and they come across me and we have an initial conversation. And I always end every single conversation with, I may or may not be able to provide every resource to you, but I'll know someone, or I may not be that perfect person to initially give you or provide the answer to what you're looking for, but I'll find the person who does. So either we've just been given a diagnosis and we're beginning to do some education, and they know that I'm a resource out there, or they have reached the point to where their physician is worried about them. Okay. Either them as a patient or their care partner. And they will be referred to me, typically through a social work consult. And I will call and just say, hey, how are things going? What can I do to support you? What resources and supports do you need to put in place that I can help you find? And we may have a very nice 15, 30, 2-hour conversation, but I always end with, feel free to call me back in any instance whatsoever. You hit a roadblock, you need another resource, you need a shoulder to cry on. Always call me back. We'll talk it through. So
I think that's important, because I think the conversation when we're dealing with advanced care planning or decisions at end of life, or making decisions as we want to age in place, is a conversation, and it's a process. It's not necessarily linear. It sometimes can go back and forth depending on the day, your stress level. I mean, you may have had, like, somebody might have called you and had a really bad day, and they're like, okay, I need help. And the next day they've calmed down, they've heard your voice, they've been able to, calm down a little bit, and then realize that, okay, what are my choices? And I think that's one of the things about with your company is that resource available, and it may be today, and it might be tomorrow, and then they may revisit, 3, 6 months, 9 months down the line. And I love the fact that you do this true care plan, the true care planning, because it's something that people need ongoing, and they need to have a plan so that everybody's on the same page. And the key would be to have the person that has the chronic disease actually be included, right? And they are. I know that's part of what you do. They're included in the decision making, because that makes the person, like the loved one, feel much more comfortable with the decisions because everybody's on the same page.
There's a phrase in the medical world that I absolutely love, is nothing about me without me.
I love
if
that.
You're talking about my care, my life, my health condition, I need to be part of those conversations. And so early on, if we are able to be part of the conversation, we want that person to be part of the conversation. Where I see a lot of families is when we're in those moderate to advanced stages, the individual can no longer be part of that conversation. We are making plans for them. I really wish a year or two prior, that person would have been able to be part of that conversation. One of the things that's really important and why we should do advanced care planning is the choices are ours.
Yes.
Those choices are taken out of our hands when we do not have these conversations early. And but yes, early on, it needs to include the person in which has the chronic health condition. After that, we are making the best decisions that we can in and of the moment.
Exactly. Well, very well said. Include the person, and it is a conversation that's sort of everlasting. So
it's very fluid.
It's very fluid. It's very, very fluid. And I think having the ability of someone to call for that support, and sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you need. And I think that's a lot of the conversations that sometimes, or calls that we get sometimes, is like they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what they need. And so having the ability to sort of like assess and, pull this out of them, like what is it that they really need? So, and you do go in their homes sometimes if needed, of course. You meet with them in communities and tour with them if they need to find, a place to for their loved one to go. So that's one of the great services that you have. So is there anything else you want to share with the folks at CAPS?
Thank you for having me today. What an honor. You guys do such great work. I love our ability to have the partnership to have that continuity of care from all professionals in this world. We're all trying to do our part and to help those folks that are living with a chronic health condition. So thank you for the work that you do.
Well, thank you. You do amazing work, incredible work. You're an incredible human being, and you support so many people and give them hope. And I think that's what today is. This is about what we do at CAPS. We want to provide hope and education and support for our community, so people know that they're not alone, that they are walking a pathway with someone.
Yes. One of my favorite phrases, and I say this a lot in the dementia world, is that life does not end with diagnosis.
Absolutely, very true. And a lot of times, sometimes this is when life actually begins, because they have that focus and that spotlight on the time that they have left in this world. So I think it's important that we do really all need to live life to its fullest, and to take breaks and take time, enjoy each other, and tell people that you love them and be good friends. So always. So,
yes.
Well, Sarah, I could not be more, grateful for you today to be joining us and for sharing everything with everyone in our community and for all that you do. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody. You guys still awake? Put your cameras on so I know I'm not alone. So I want to see if anybody put your cameras on if you want. Does anybody have any questions for me, or questions that I can send to Sarah? How's everybody doing? Nobody? No questions?
No questions. Great information though.
Okay, good. If you please, if there's anything that presentation, so I'm in charge of putting together the speakers that come each and every month to on the Saturdays. And we're hoping that in the next 1 to 2 months, we're going to be doing things in person. We're actually going to be starting, probably be able to launch the information this week about in-person support groups, one in Round Rock, one in Central Austin, downtown, right near about 45th Street, and then one down really south in, I don't know exactly what the town is, but it's very, very, very south. So we're going to be launching those in-person support groups, and our plan is to get us all in person. We're also going to be relaunching, and I know some folks are already there. We're going to be relaunching the tacos. So we do the taco breakfast. So I'm really excited about that also. So definitely keep an eye on our CAPS website, keep an eye on the Facebook page. We'll be adding things and a lot of good stuff. We're ready to, because now we're at stage 2, we're really not hearing a whole lot. You know, it's still out there with COVID, but we're all ready to sort of get in person. So expect to see in-person presentations probably during the week. Also having a regular place where we can have an in-person presentation on a regular basis on Saturdays as well. So I think we've identified the place that we're having it in Central Austin. And so just a little more information to come, but very, very exciting. So if there's any questions that you guys have, feel free. I think there is a chat box somewhere. Yeah, there is. Feel free to, put that in the chat box. And otherwise, we were going to wish all of you a very, very, very great day. Happy spring. For those of you that aren't originally from Texas, this is the beginning of the just the beautiful bluebonnets. So go out, take a drive, enjoy the bluebonnets and the festivals, and go to Fredericksburg. You guys, oh, you're welcome, Andrea. Thank you so much, everybody. You guys have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.